The rain in Blackwood Hollow didn't wash things clean, it just made the rot swell. I sat in the cab of my rusted truck, the engine ticking as it cooled, watching the water streak the windshield like prison bars. Through the blur, the spire of the chapel of the tilled earth rose like a blackened, arthritic finger pointing accusingly at a godless sky. It had been 15 years since I scrambled out of the cellar window, bleeding and weeping, running until the soles of my shoes disintegrated on the asphalt of the state highway. I was a boy then. I was a survivor now. Or so I told the reflection in the rearview mirror, a man with hollowed-out eyes and a scar running from the lobe of my left ear down to the collarbone. I touched the scar. It was the only place on my body that didn't shiver from the damp cold. I checked the Glock, 19 inches my lap. 17 rounds. 1 for the lock, 15 for the congregation, and the last one, well, that depended on what I found in the choir loft. The town was silent. It was always silent. In Blackwood Hollow, you didn't speak unless you were spoken to, and you certainly didn't sing, not unless you were chosen, not unless you had the throat for it. I stepped out of the truck, my boots sinking into the muck. The smell hit me instantly, a cloying, sweet stench of wet soil, lilies, and something beneath it all that smelled like old copper pennies. Blood. I walked toward the double oak doors. They were unbarred. They wanted people to come in. They always needed fresh soil. Inside, the air was thick enough to chew. The nave was lit by hundreds of beeswax candles, their flames standing perfectly still despite the draught. The pews were packed. I kept to the shadows of the vestibule, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I saw the backs of heads, grey hair, brown hair, bald spots, all bowed in uniform reverence. They didn't move. They didn't cough. They barely seemed to breathe. And then the sound began. It didn't start as a song. It started as a vibration in the floorboards, a low thrum that travelled up through the soles of my boots and settled in the marrow of my shin bones. Then the hum rose. It wasn't human. It lacked the jagged edges of breath, the slight waver of a diaphragm. It was a pure, crystalline frequency that made my teeth ache. The choir stood on the raised dais behind the altar, robed in crimson velvet that looked black in the candlelight. There were 12 of them, men and women I might have known once, faces smoothed out by a terrifying serenity. Their mouths were open, jaws unhinged, slightly wider than anatomy should allow, and from their throats came that sound, a perfect, multitonal chord that sounded like the weeping of angels and the grinding of tectonic plates. I saw her, Anna. She was third from the left. My little sister. She had been 12 when I left. She was 27 now. Her face was pale, translucent almost, her hands clasped loosely in front of her. But it was her neck that froze the blood in my veins. It was distended, bulging outward as if she had swallowed a baseball. The skin pulsed, rippling with a wet, serpentine movement that synchronized with the high note she was sustaining. She wasn't singing. Something inside her was singing through her. "Welcome, traveler," a voice boomed, cutting through the harmony like a cleaver. The music stopped instantly. The silence that followed was heavy, a vacuum that sucked the air from the room. Father Malachi stepped from the shadows of the pulpit. He hadn't aged a day in 15 years. He was a tall man, skeletal and gaunt, wearing vestments stained with dark earth. His eyes were milky, blind, yet he looked directly at me, hiding in the gloom of the entrance. "Come forward, Julian," Malachi said. His voice was wet, a gargle of phlegm and authority. The prodigal son returns to the soil. The congregation didn't turn around. They didn't even twitch. I raised the gun, stepping into the aisle. "I'm not here for the soil, Malachi. I'm here for Anna." "Anna is happy," Malachi smiled, revealing gums that were black and receding. Anna has been blessed. She has the voice now. She carries the saint within. Let her go, I warned, my voice cracking. It sounded so weak compared to the unnatural resonance of the room. Or I drop you right here. Violence? Malachi sighed, stepping down from the altar. Always the first resort of the empty vessel. You rejected the gift, Julian. I remember. You vomited the sacrament. You bit the saint. I flinched at the memory. The cold, slimy texture sliding down my throat, the way it had wriggled, fighting the swallow, trying to latch onto my tonsils. I had retched it up, stomped on it until it was white paste, and ran. I didn't bite it, I whispered. I killed it. And look at you, Malachi spread his arms. Alone, afraid, your voice is rough, ugly. You speak, but you say nothing. Listen to them, Julian. Listen to the unity. He raised a hand. The choir opened their mouths again. This time it wasn't a hymn. It was a shriek. It hit me like a physical blow, a wall of sound that scrambled my equilibrium. I dropped to one knee, covering my ears, but the sound didn't come through the ears. It vibrated the skull itself. It was the sound of 1,000 drowning things screaming at once. Then, just as quickly, Malachi closed his hand. Silence. That is the sound of the divine, Malachi whispered. The vermis sanctum, the sacred worm. It eats the sin, Julian. It eats the doubt. It eats the vocal cords, yes, but it replaces them with something eternal. I forced myself to stand, the gun shaking in my grip. I'm taking her. You can try. Malachi stepped aside, but be warned. The separation is traumatic. I walked down the aisle, the gun trained on the priest's chest. I climbed the dais steps. The choir members didn't look at me. Their eyes were rolled back, showing only the whites. I reached Anna. Anna? I whispered, grabbing her shoulder. She was cold, not dead cold, but reptile cold. She didn't react. Her jaw hung slack. I looked closely at her neck beneath the translucent skin. I could see it. A thick, white ring segment coiled around her windpipe, pulsing with a faint bioluminescent light. It was huge, filling the entirety of her throat. Anna, it's Julian. I'm getting you out. I grabbed her hand and pulled. She stumbled forward, her movements jerky, like a marionette with tangled strings. She cannot leave, Malachi said softly from behind me. She is the host. The church is the hive. Shut up, I screamed, firing a warning shot into the ceiling. Dust and plaster rained down. The congregation still didn't move. That was when I realized the smell of rot was coming from the pews. I looked at the person nearest the front row, Mrs. Gable, the old librarian. I nudged her with my boot. She toppled over sideways, stiff as a board. Her face was gray, eyes sunken, dead. They were all dead, preserved, embalmed, sitting in the pews to create the illusion of a flock. The choir were the only living things in the room. "Bring the truck around!" I yelled at no one, panic finally overriding my bravado. I dragged Anna down the aisle. She was heavy, dead weight, her feet dragging. We made it to the vestibule. I kicked the doors open, dragging her out into the rain. I thought the fresh air would wake her up, snap her out of the trance, but as soon as the cold rain hit her skin, she began to make a sound. It was a gurgling, high-pitched whine. Her hands flew to her throat, clawing at the skin. It's okay, I stammered, fumbling for the keys. "I'm going to get that thing out of you. I know a doctor in the city, a surgeon. We'll cut it out." I shoved her into the passenger seat. She was thrashing now, her eyes wide, but there was no recognition in them, only blind, animalistic panic. I sped away, tires spinning in the mud, tearing out of the church lot. I didn't look back at Malachi. I just drove. 10 miles out, the screaming started. It wasn't Anna screaming. It was the worm. Her mouth opened so wide the corners of her lips tore, bleeding down her chin. A sound erupted from her that shattered the passenger window. It was a frequency of pure agony. The worm sensed the distance from the hive. It was dying, or it was calling for help. "Hold on," I yelled, covering one ear, steering with one hand. "Just hold on." She lunged at me. Her fingers, strong with hysterical strength, wrapped around my throat. I slammed on the brakes, the truck fishtailing and sliding into a ditch. We slammed into a tree with a crunch of metal. Silence returned, save for the hiss of the radiator. I coughed, tasting blood. "Anna?" She was slumped over the dashboard. She was breathing, but it was ragged, a wet, rattling wheeze. I pulled her back. Her eyes were focused now. She looked at me. For the first time, she truly saw me. "Julie Ann," she rasped. The voice was grinding, like stones rubbing together. "I'm here," I wept, brushing the hair from her face. "I'm here. You're safe." "It hurts," she whispered. She pointed to her throat. "Hungry." "I know. We'll get it out." "No," she wheezed, her eyes filled with tears. "Not the worm." She grabbed my hand and pressed it to her neck. I could feel the creature inside, thrashing violently, knotting itself. "The worm is quiet," she choked out. "The others." I froze. "What others?" "The failed ones." Suddenly, the woods around the truck weren't silent anymore. I heard the snapping of twigs, the squelch of bare feet on mud, and then the shrieking. It wasn't the harmonious, beautiful terror of the choir. This was dissonant, broken, the sound of vocal cords that had been shredded and healed wrong. It was a cacophony of barks, yelps, and jagged screams.